Marcus Reed had opened the front door of Reed's Corner Market the same way every morning for almost 9 years. He would slide the key into the old brass lock, lift the door slightly because the frame had warped during a rainy winter, then push it open with his shoulder while the little bell above the entrance gave its tired, familiar ring. To most people, it was just a corner store. A small brick building with faded green paint around the windows, a hand-painted sign above the entrance, and crates of oranges and potatoes stacked near the door. But to Marcus, that store was the last piece of a life he had fought desperately to keep together. That morning started like any other. The sky was still gray. The street lights were still glowing. The bakery across the road had not even raised its shutters yet. Marcus stepped inside, carrying a thermos of coffee in one hand and his daughter's pink backpack in the other. 8-year-old Lila followed behind him, half asleep, dragging her sneakers across the floor and holding a toaster pastry in her mouth because they were running late again. "Daddy," she mumbled, "you said you were going to wake me up early." Marcus set her backpack behind the register and smiled. "I did wake you up early. You went back to sleep with your math book on your face." Lila rolled her eyes, but she smiled too. She climbed onto the little stool behind the counter, the same stool her mother used to sit on years before, and opened her homework folder. Marcus turned on the lights, started the coffee machine near the back, checked the register, and unlocked the refrigerator case. It was quiet, peaceful, ordinary. The kind of morning a hardworking father prays for when life has already given him more storms than he ever asked to survive. Then, less than 20 minutes later, 2 police officers walked through the front door. At first, Marcus barely looked up. He was stocking bread on the front shelf and thought maybe they had come in for coffee. Officers sometimes did. Taxi drivers did too. Nurses from the clinic came in after night shifts. Construction workers came in before sunrise. And old Mr. Bennett came in every morning just to buy one banana and complain about the weather. Marcus knew everyone. Everyone knew Marcus. But these officers did not smile. They did not look around like customers. They stepped inside slowly, studying the store, studying Marcus, studying the register, studying the shelves, as if they had walked into a crime scene instead of a neighborhood market. One of them, a tall officer with a square jaw and cold eyes, asked, "Sir, what are you doing in here?" Marcus held a loaf of bread in his hand and gave a confused laugh. "Working." The second officer glanced toward the back room. "Is the owner here?" Marcus placed the bread on the shelf. "You're looking at him." For a moment, nobody spoke. The bell above the door was still swinging slightly. Lila looked up from her homework, her pencil frozen in her hand. The first officer stepped closer. "We got a call about a suspicious individual breaking into this property." Marcus looked down at the keys clipped to his belt, then back at the officer. "Breaking in?" "Officer, this is my store. I opened it." "You have identification?" "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "My wallet is behind the counter. My business license is right there on the wall." He pointed to the framed certificate beside the lottery machine. His name was printed clearly in black letters. Marcus Anthony Reed, owner and operator, Reed's Corner Market. But the officer barely turned his head. "Keep your hands where I can see them," the officer said. Marcus slowly raised both hands, palms open. "I'm not doing anything wrong." Lila slid off the stool. "Daddy." Marcus looked at her quickly, forcing his voice to stay gentle. "It's okay, baby. Stay there." But it was not okay. Because in the next few seconds, the peaceful little store that Marcus had built with grief, sweat, love, and impossible patience became the place where his daughter watched strangers treat her father like he did not belong in the very business that carried his name. The officer grabbed Marcus's wrist as Marcus reached toward the counter for his wallet. Marcus pulled back only out of surprise, but the officer twisted his arm behind him. "Don't resist." "I'm not resisting," Marcus said, his voice tightening. "You asked for my ID." Lila screamed. "Stop. That's my dad." A carton of eggs slipped from Mrs. Alvarez's hands near the dairy case and cracked across the floor. She had come in for milk and bread like she did every Tuesday, and now she stood frozen, one hand over her mouth. Another customer near the coffee machine pulled out his phone. The second officer moved toward him and said, "Back up." Marcus was turned toward the wall, his cheek inches from a poster advertising 2-for-1 canned beans. Cold metal closed around his wrists. Behind him, his daughter cried so hard she could barely breathe. "This is my store," Marcus said again. "Please. My daughter is here. Just look at the license." But nobody looked. And just as they started pulling him toward the door, the bell above the entrance rang again. This time, the person who walked in was not a customer. It was the mayor. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, like this video, subscribe, and comment your city below so we know where you're watching from. Before that moment, before the handcuffs, before the phones came out, before the mayor stepped inside and saw Marcus Reed being dragged across the floor of his own store, there was a story most people in the city never knew. Marcus had not inherited an easy life. He had inherited responsibility. Reed's Corner Market had belonged first to his father-in-law, Raymond Ellis, a proud man with silver hair, a sharp tongue, and a heart so generous that people joked he would give away the whole store if his wife did not watch him. Raymond had opened the market more than 30 years earlier, back when the neighborhood was filled with factory workers, church families, small diners, and children who played stickball in the alley until their mothers shouted them home. When Marcus married Raymond's daughter, Denise, the store became part of his life too. At first, he only helped on weekends. He carried boxes, swept floors, fixed a freezer when it broke, and listened while Raymond taught him the rules of surviving in business. "Know your numbers," Raymond would say. "Know your customers. And never let anybody make you feel like a guest in the place you built." Marcus remembered that line often. After Raymond passed, Denise kept the store running. She was the face people loved. She knew every child's favorite candy, every grandmother's preferred tea, every regular customer's birthday. Marcus used to joke that she could remember a stranger's grocery list better than he could remember his own phone number. Together, they had plans. They were going to repaint the sign, expand the produce section, maybe open a little deli counter near the front window. They were not rich, but they were hopeful. And sometimes hope feels like wealth when you are building something with someone you love. Then Denise got sick. At first, she called it exhaustion, then stress, then a stubborn flu that would not leave. By the time the doctors said the word nobody wanted to hear, Marcus felt the floor vanish beneath him. For 18 months, he tried to be husband, father, nurse, store owner, and believer all at once. Some days, he succeeded. Many days, he only survived. When Denise died, Lila was 5 years old and still small enough to fall asleep against his chest. For weeks after the funeral, Marcus could not bring himself to open the store on time. He would stand outside before sunrise with the keys in his hand, staring at the sign, hearing Denise's laugh in places where there was only silence. He thought about selling. People told him he should. They said it was too much for one man, especially a single father. They said he needed to move on. But one evening, Lila walked behind a register, touched a framed photo of her mother, and whispered, "Mommy's smile is still here." Marcus opened the store the next morning. From then on, Reed's Corner Market became more than a business. It became his promise. Every shelf he stocked, every floor he mopped, every bill he paid late, every morning he opened before the sun came up, he was keeping that promise. He was telling his daughter, without words, that love did not end just because someone was gone. The neighborhood knew it. They saw him carrying Lila on his hip while unloading crates. They saw him helping old women cross the street with grocery bags. They saw him let customers pay later when their checks were short. He kept a notebook under the counter, filled with names and amounts, but he almost never asked for the money back unless he knew they could afford it. "Marcus," Mrs. Alvarez told him once, "you run this place like a church." He laughed. "Then I guess canned soup is communion." But not everyone appreciated what the store meant. Over the past year, the neighborhood had started changing fast. The old laundromat became a wine bar. The barber shop became a boutique fitness studio. The empty lot across the street became a glass apartment building with rooftop fire pits and rent prices that made long-time residents shake their heads. New people moved in, and some were kind. But others looked at Reed's Corner Market like it was a stain on their perfect new view. The complaints started small. Someone called the city about boxes near the back door. Someone complained that delivery trucks came too early. Someone claimed teenagers were gathering outside the store, even though the teenagers were usually just buying chips after school. Then came letters from developers. Polite at first, then persistent. They wanted the building. They wanted the corner. They wanted Marcus gone. One developer even sat across from him in the store office and slid a number across the desk that made Marcus go quiet. "You could start fresh," the man said. "Somewhere better." Marcus looked at the offer, then looked through the office window at Lila taping one of her drawings beside the register. "I'm already somewhere better," he said. After that, the pressure grew. And on the morning everything changed. Marcus noticed a woman standing outside the new apartment building across the street. Her name was Claire Whitman. He had seen her before at neighborhood meetings, always complaining about noise, parking, trash, foot traffic, anything connected to the older businesses on the block. She stood near the entrance in a cream-colored coat, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed on Marcus as he unlocked his store. Marcus noticed her, but he did not think much of it. He had bread to stock, coffee to brew, a daughter to get to school, and a life to keep holding together. He had no idea that the call she was making would bring police to his door. He had no idea that before the morning was over, he would be in handcuffs. And he had no idea that the next person to walk into his store would turn the entire city's attention toward the truth. Claire Whitman had not lived in the neighborhood long enough to know its history, but she had lived there long enough to decide what she thought it should become. To her, the block was not a community with roots, stories, memories, and people who had held each other together through hard times. It was an investment, a place on the edge of transformation, a place that, in her words at one neighborhood meeting, had potential if the right kind of standards were finally enforced. Marcus had been at that meeting. He remembered how the room went quiet when she said it. He remembered Mrs. Alvarez folding her arms. He remembered Mr. Bennett whispering, "Right kind of standards means wrong kind of people." And he remembered Claire smiling as if she had not insulted half the room without ever raising her voice. She was always careful like that. She rarely said anything directly enough to be challenged. She spoke in polished phrases: safety, cleanliness, property values, community improvement. But somehow every complaint circled back to the same few places: the barbershop, the old diner, the laundromat, and Reed's Corner Market. That morning, from across the street, Claire watched Marcus unlock the store. She saw him lift the old door with his shoulder, step inside, and turn on the lights. She saw Lila follow behind him with her pink backpack bouncing against her legs. If she had looked closely, she might have seen the framed business license near the register. She might have seen the delivery crates stacked beside the counter. She might have seen the small handwritten sign in the window that said, "Open early for our working neighbors." But Claire did not look for understanding. She looked for confirmation. She stood under the awning of her apartment building, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Yes, I'd like to report something suspicious," she said. "There's a man entering the store across the street." The dispatcher asked her if the store was open. "No, it's too early," Claire replied. "The lights were off when he went in." The dispatcher asked if the man had broken a window or forced the door. Claire hesitated. "I couldn't tell from here." The dispatcher asked if he had a key. Claire looked across the street again. Through the window, she could see Marcus moving behind the counter like someone who knew exactly where everything was. That should have answered the question. But instead, she said, "I don't know." He looked suspicious. "What makes him suspicious, ma'am?" Claire exhaled, irritated by the question. "He doesn't look like he belongs there." The words left her mouth smoothly, almost casually, but they carried the weight of something much older than one phone call. They carried every assumption Marcus had spent his life learning how to survive. They carried every locked door, every followed aisle, every second glance, every demand to prove what others were allowed to simply be. Inside the store, Marcus knew none of this was happening. He was too busy trying to get through another morning. The coffee machine was making that choking sound it made when the filter was not placed right. Lila was complaining about her spelling words. The bread delivery had arrived 10 minutes late, which meant Marcus would have to stock the front shelves quickly if he wanted to get Lila to school before the late bell. "Spell neighborhood," he called out while opening a crate. Lila groaned. Daddy, why does that word need so many letters? Because neighborhoods are complicated, he said. She leaned over her worksheet. Neigh. Good. Bur. Good. Hood. Marcus smiled. See? You got it. She looked proud for half a second, then suspicious. Are you smiling because I spelled it right or because you think you're funny? Both things can be true. Lila shook her head like she was raising herself instead of the other way around. A few minutes later, Mrs. Alvarez came in wearing her blue cardigan and carrying a reusable grocery bag that had been patched twice at the bottom. She had lived 3 blocks away for 40 years and treated Reed's Corner Market like an extension of her kitchen. She knew when Marcus was tired, when Lila had a school project, when the freezer was acting up, and when someone in the neighborhood needed help but was too proud to ask. Good morning, Mijo, she said. Morning, Mrs. A. Your milk came in fresh today. You say that every time. And every time it's true. She laughed and looked over at Lila. And how is my favorite scholar? Lila held up her worksheet. I spelled neighborhood. Mrs. Alvarez placed a hand over her heart. Better than most adults at City Hall. Marcus laughed from behind the bread rack. It was a small moment, but those small moments were what kept the store alive. Reed's Corner Market did not survive because it was fancy. It survived because people felt known there. A man could walk in short $2 and still leave with dinner. A child could wait by the counter until her mother got off work. An old woman could ask Marcus to read the tiny print on a medicine bottle without feeling embarrassed. There were stores with brighter lights and cleaner floors, but there were not many places left where people still asked, "How's your heart today?" and actually waited for the answer. Then the police car pulled up. Mrs. Alvarez noticed it first through the front window. Her smile faded slightly, not because police never came into the store, but because this car stopped too sharply, too deliberately. A second cruiser rolled in behind it. 2 officers stepped out and looked toward the front door. Marcus glanced up. Maybe something happened outside. He wiped his hands on a towel and stepped behind the counter. Lila looked at him, sensing something in his face change before he said a word. The bell rang. The officers entered. The first one was Officer Daniels, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed trained not to reveal anything. The second was Officer Briggs, younger but harder in his movements, his eyes scanning the store as if every shelf might be hiding a threat. Daniels looked at Marcus. Sir, step away from the counter. Marcus blinked. Good morning to you too. Step away from the counter. Mrs. Alvarez straightened. Officer, is there a problem? Briggs held up a hand without looking at her. Ma'am, stay where you are. Marcus slowly moved from behind the counter, careful with every gesture. He knew that carefulness. He hated that he knew it. He had learned it as a teenager. Learned how to keep his voice even, how to keep his hands visible, how not to move too fast, how not to sound angry even when anger was the only reasonable thing to feel. What's going on? He asked. Daniel said, we received a report of a suspicious male entering this property before business hours. Marcus stared at him for a moment, waiting for the part that made sense. I enter before business hours because I open before business hours. This is my store. Briggs looked around, unimpressed. You the owner? Yes. You have proof. Marcus pointed toward the wall. Business license is right there. My name is Marcus Reed. Daniels did not move toward the license. Do you have ID on you? My wallet is behind the counter. Don't go behind the counter. Marcus took a breath. Then how do you want me to get it? Lila had gone very still. Her pencil lay on the counter beside her homework. Her eyes moved from her father to the officers and back again. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward. Officers, everybody knows Marcus. He owns this store. I have been shopping here since before that little girl was born. Ma'am, Briggs said sharply, do not interfere. She is not interfering, Marcus said. She is telling you the truth. Danielle's eyes narrowed. Sir, I need you to calm down. Marcus almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because of how quickly the world could turn upside down. He had not raised his voice. He had not threatened anyone. He had not taken one step toward them. Yet somehow he was already being treated like the dangerous one. I am calm, he said slowly. I'm asking you to look at the license on the wall. Briggs moved closer. Put your hands on the counter. Marcus did as he was told. Lila slid off the stool. Baby, stay back, Marcus said. But Daddy. Stay back. Daniels looked toward the back room. Anyone else in here? My daughter, Marcus said. And customers. Because this is a store. Briggs's jaw tightened at the answer. You think this is a joke? No, Marcus said. I think this is a mistake. Outside, a few pedestrians had stopped. Through the front window, Marcus could see Claire standing across the street, still holding her phone. Their eyes met for one brief second. She looked away, and in that second, Marcus understood. This was not random. This was not confusion. This was the same pressure, the same suspicion, the same message wrapped in a new uniform. You do not belong here. Daniels said, we're going to detain you until we sort this out. Marcus's heart dropped. Detain me? For opening my own store. Turn around. No, Lila cried. He didn't do anything. Marcus looked at his daughter, and the fear in her face nearly broke him. He wanted to pick her up. He wanted to tell her this was all a misunderstanding, that adults would realize their mistake and apologize, that the world was fair if you just explained yourself clearly enough. But Marcus had lived too long to believe that. He turned around slowly. Briggs took his wrist. Please, Marcus said, voice low. Don't do this in front of my child. Hands behind your back. Mrs. Alvarez's grocery bag slipped from her arm. This is wrong. You hear me? This is wrong. The cuffs clicked. Lila screamed as if the sound had cut through her. Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second. Not because he was weak. Because he needed 1 second to put all his pain somewhere his daughter could not see it. When he opened them again, he looked straight ahead at the wall where his business license hung untouched, ignored, useless in the face of men who had already decided what they saw. Outside, more people gathered. Phones were raised. Voices rose. Someone shouted that Marcus owned the place. Someone else yelled for the officers to check the paperwork. But the officers kept moving. They led Marcus past the counter where Lila had learned to count change. Past the shelf Denise had painted yellow because she said the store needed sunshine. Past the donation jar. Past the photo of Raymond Ellis standing proudly on opening day. Past every piece of evidence that this place was his life. Lila ran after him, sobbing. Daddy, Daddy, don't go. Marcus twisted his head enough to see her. Lila, listen to me. Stay with Mrs. Alvarez. I'm okay. But his voice cracked on the last word. Because he was not okay. He was humiliated. He was furious. He was afraid. And worst of all, he could see in his daughter's eyes that something innocent inside her was being forced to grow up too fast. The officers reached the front door. Then the bell rang again. A woman stepped inside wearing a navy blue coat, her expression calm until she saw the cuffs around Marcus's wrists. Every voice in the store seemed to vanish. Officer Daniels turned, irritated. Ma'am, you need to step back. But Mrs. Alvarez whispered, Oh, thank God. Marcus looked up. Mayor Evelyn Carter stood in the doorway, staring at him like she could not believe what she was seeing. And when she spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled, and sharp enough to stop everyone cold. Why, she asked, is Marcus Reed in handcuffs? Officer Daniels did not recognize Mayor Evelyn Carter at first. Or maybe he did, but the shock of seeing her standing inside Reed's Corner Market made him slow to react. She was not surrounded by cameras. She was not behind a podium. She had no staff crowding behind her, no reporters shouting questions, no official announcement prepared. She was simply there, standing beneath the old bell above the door, holding a folder in one hand and staring at Marcus Reed's handcuffed wrists. Ma'am, Daniel said, trying to recover his authority. Please step outside. This is an active police matter. Mayor Carter did not move. Her eyes shifted from Daniels to Briggs, then back to Marcus. She saw his daughter crying near Mrs. Alvarez. She saw customers pressed against the shelves, phones in their hands, afraid to speak too loudly. She saw the business license on the wall. Then she looked at the officers again. I asked you a question, she said. Why is Marcus Reed in handcuffs? Briggs straightened. We received a call about a break-in. A break-in. The mayor repeated the words slowly, as if giving the officers a chance to hear how foolish they sounded. At Reed's Corner Market? Yes, ma'am, Daniel said. A suspicious male was reported entering the property before business hours. The mayor's face hardened. That suspicious male is the owner. Marcus swallowed, still trying to keep himself together. The cuffs were biting into his wrists. His shoulder ached from the way Briggs had twisted his arm. But none of that hurt as much as Lila's crying. Her little body shook against Mrs. Alvarez, and every sob felt like another accusation against the adults who had failed her. Mayor Carter stepped farther into the store. Did either of you check the business license on the wall? Neither officer answered. Did you ask the customers inside this store whether they knew him? Silence. Did you verify the call before placing a business owner in handcuffs in front of his child? Daniels cleared his throat. We were securing the scene. This is not a scene, Mayor Carter said. This is a grocery store. His grocery store. Briggs shifted his weight. Ma'am, we had probable cause to detain him while investigating. The mayor looked at Marcus's wrists. And now you have cause to remove those handcuffs. Daniels hesitated. That hesitation changed the air in the room. Everyone felt it. It was not long, maybe only 2 seconds, but it said enough. For 2 seconds, a police officer considered whether he could refuse the mayor while the rightful owner of the store stood cuffed beneath his own business license. Mayor Carter's voice dropped. Officer Daniels, remove them now. This time, Daniels nodded toward Briggs. Briggs unlocked the cuffs, his movements stiff and reluctant. The metal opened. Marcus brought his hands forward slowly, rubbing his wrists. The moment he was free, Lila broke away from Mrs. Alvarez and ran to him. Daddy. Marcus dropped to his knees and caught her in his arms. He held her so tightly it looked like he was trying to shield her from the memory itself. Lila buried her face in his neck, sobbing. I told them this was our store. I know, baby, Marcus whispered. I know you did. His voice trembled, and for the first time that morning, he stopped trying to look strong. He pressed his cheek against her hair and closed his eyes. Around them, the store stayed silent. Even the officers seemed unsure where to look. Mrs. Alvarez wiped tears from her face with the sleeve of her cardigan. Mayor Carter watched the father and daughter for a moment, and something in her expression changed from anger to grief. She had known Marcus for years, not as a headline, not as a case, but as a man who had helped her office when the city's food assistance program was falling behind. During the winter storm 2 years earlier, when roads were blocked and families could not get supplies, Marcus had opened his store after midnight and helped distribute canned food, diapers, batteries, and medicine. He had refused payment. He had said, just make sure the people who need it get it. That was why the mayor had come that morning. Not for a ceremony, but to ask if his store could serve again as a pickup location for elderly residents during an upcoming heat wave. She had expected to find Marcus behind the counter, teasing customers, telling Lila to finish her homework. Instead, she had walked in on a man being treated like a criminal in the place where he had served the city better than many people with official titles. Mayor Carter turned back to the officers. Who made the call? Daniel said, dispatch received it from a resident across the street. Marcus lifted his head. Claire Whitman. The mayor looked at him. You know that. Marcus nodded toward the window. She was watching when I opened. She's still out there. Everyone turned. Across the street, near the entrance of the glass apartment building, Claire stood with her arms folded, pretending not to stare. But it was too late. Too many people had seen her. Too many phones were already recording. Mayor Carter walked to the front door and opened it. Ms. Whitman, she called. Claire froze. Please come here. Claire looked around, as if hoping someone else had the same name. Then she crossed the street slowly, her chin lifted in the stiff way people use when they are afraid but determined not to appear small. She stepped into the store and immediately noticed the phones pointed at her. I was only concerned, Claire said, before anyone asked her anything. Mayor Carter studied her. Did you call the police? Claire's lips tightened. Yes. I saw someone entering before the store was open. Someone. Mrs. Alvarez said. His name is Marcus. Claire glanced at Marcus, then away. I didn't know that. Marcus stood with Lila, still clinging to his side. You've seen me at neighborhood meetings. I've seen many people at neighborhood meetings. You've complained about my store at 3 of them. Claire's face flushed. This is not about your store. This is about safety. Mayor Carter took a step closer. What exactly made you unsafe? Claire opened her mouth, but no answer came quickly enough. The mayor continued. Did you see him force the door? No. Did you see him break glass? No. Did you see him carrying stolen property? No, but you saw a black man unlock a store before sunrise, and instead of asking a question, you called the police. Claire stiffened. I never mentioned race. Mrs. Alvarez's voice cut through the room. You didn't have to. The words landed hard. Even Claire seemed to feel them, though she tried to hide it. If you're watching this and believe no hardworking parent should be treated this way, like this video, subscribe, and comment your city below. Mayor Carter turned to Daniels and Briggs. I want your supervisor here. I want body camera footage preserved. I want the dispatch recording. And I want a written report explaining why visible proof of ownership was ignored. Daniels nodded tightly. Yes, Mayor. Briggs looked down at the floor. Marcus should have felt relieved, but relief did not come. His wrists were free, but his dignity still felt bruised. His daughter was safe in his arms, but she had seen something no child should have to see. And Claire, standing only a few feet away, still looked more embarrassed than sorry. Then a teenage boy near the coffee machine raised his hand. His name was Jamal. He came into the store almost every morning before school, usually with headphones around his neck and just enough money for a breakfast sandwich. Marcus often slipped an apple into his bag when he thought Jamal was not looking. Mayor Carter, Jamal said quietly, you need to see this. He held out his phone. The store went still again. Jamal tapped the screen and turned up the volume. The video had been recorded from outside just after Claire made the call. Her voice was clear enough to hear. I'm telling you, Claire said in the recording, speaking to someone near her building. People like him are the reason this block will never improve. Nobody moved. Claire's face drained of color. That was taken out of context. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time that morning, he did not look confused or afraid. He looked tired. Deeply, painfully tired. What context makes that better? He asked. Claire had no answer. Mayor Carter handed the phone back to Jamal. Send that to my office. Then she looked around the store at the cracked eggs on the floor, the shaken customers, the little girl still gripping her father's shirt, and the business license that had been visible the entire time. What happened here today, she said, will not be buried. Outside, more people were gathering. Word was spreading from mouth to mouth, phone to phone, block to block. And as Marcus stood in the center of the store he had nearly been dragged out of, he realized this morning was no longer just about him. It was about every person who had ever been forced to prove they belonged somewhere they had already built. By noon, Reed's Corner Market no longer felt like a small neighborhood store. It felt like the center of the entire city. People stood shoulder to shoulder outside the front windows, some angry, some crying, some simply silent because they did not know what to say after seeing the video. A few customers had posted their recordings online, and within hours, Marcus's name was everywhere. The image that spread fastest was not of Claire or the police cars or even Mayor Carter standing in the doorway. It was a still frame of Lila reaching for her father while handcuffs circled his wrists. Marcus hated that image. He hated that the world was now seeing his daughter's pain. He hated that strangers were turning the worst moment of her young life into comments, hashtags, and arguments. But he also understood why people were sharing it. The picture told the truth in a way no official report could soften. It showed a child begging adults to see her father as a father. It showed a business owner treated like an intruder beneath his own roof. It showed exactly what Marcus had tried so hard to protect Lila from. Mayor Carter stayed longer than anyone expected. She did not give a speech at first. She helped Mrs. Alvarez sit down. She asked Lila if she wanted water. She told Marcus he did not have to speak until he was ready. Then she stepped outside and made calls from the sidewalk, her voice low but firm. Within 30 minutes, a police supervisor arrived. Within an hour, 2 city attorneys came. By early afternoon, the mayor's office released a statement confirming that the incident was under formal review. But inside the store, none of that made Marcus feel whole. He stood behind the counter, trying to work because work was what he knew how to do when his life hurt. A woman came in and bought one bottle of water, then left a $20 bill and whispered, "Keep the change." An older man bought a newspaper he clearly did not want. A young mother came in with her son and told Marcus, "I just wanted him to meet you." The boy looked shyly at Marcus and said, "My mom says you're brave." Marcus smiled because the child deserved a smile. But after they left, he leaned against the counter and rubbed the red marks on his wrists. Brave. The word felt strange. Marcus had not felt brave that morning. He had felt trapped. He had felt powerless. He had felt the old fear that every black father knows but never wants to explain to his child too soon. That being right does not always protect you. That being calm does not always save you. That owning something does not always stop people from treating you like you stole it. Lila sat in the back room with Mrs. Alvarez, wrapped in a blanket even though the room was warm. Every few minutes, Marcus looked through the doorway to check on her. Each time, she was looking back at him. Finally, he went to her. "Baby," he said softly, kneeling in front of her, "you want to go home?" Lila shook her head. "If we leave, will they take the store?" The question broke something inside him. "No," Marcus said quickly. "No, sweetheart. Nobody is taking the store. But they tried to take you." Mrs. Alvarez turned away, pretending to adjust the coffee cups so they would not see her tears. Marcus took Lila's hands. They were wrong. What happened today was wrong. Because of the lady? Marcus paused. He wanted to give a simple answer. He wanted to say yes, Claire made a bad call, the officers made a bad choice, the mayor fixed it, and now everything was over. But children can feel when adults are hiding the shape of the truth. Because some people see what they want to see, he said. And sometimes they decide who belongs before they know anything about them. Lila looked toward the front of the store. "But we belong here." Marcus nodded. "Yes, we do." By late afternoon, the line outside had wrapped around the block. People came from neighborhoods Marcus had never visited. Some brought flowers. Some brought handwritten notes. Some came to buy groceries, and others came just to shake his hand. Someone taped a sign to the front window that said, "This is Marcus's store." A little girl taped another beside it that said, "Lila belongs here too." The second sign made Marcus step outside and cover his mouth with his hand. That was when the crowd began clapping. Not the wild applause of celebration, but the heavy, emotional applause of people trying to give back a piece of dignity that had been stolen. Marcus stood there under the old green sign, overwhelmed by faces. He saw old customers, new neighbors, church members, teachers from Lila's school, nurses from the clinic, delivery drivers, teenagers, retired factory workers, and people who had only learned his name that morning. For years, Marcus had wondered if the neighborhood was slipping away one building at a time. But standing in front of him was proof that memory did not disappear just because rent went up. Mayor Carter returned just before sunset, this time with cameras waiting. Marcus did not want a press conference, but he agreed to stand beside her because she promised the message would not be about politics. It would be about accountability. The mayor faced the crowd and said the city would review every step of the incident, from the 911 call to the decision to handcuff Marcus. She announced that the officers involved had been placed on administrative duty pending review. She said the dispatch audio and body camera footage would be preserved. Then she spoke about something larger, the pattern of complaints against small businesses in changing neighborhoods, especially businesses owned by people of color. Safety cannot become a polite word for exclusion, she said, and city services must never be used as tools of intimidation. The crowd murmured in agreement. Then reporters turned to Marcus. Dozens of cameras pointed at him. Microphones pushed forward. Questions came all at once. Was he angry? Would he sue? What did he want to happen to the officers? Did he accept Claire Whitman's explanation? Was he planning to move his business? Marcus looked at the cameras, then down at Lila, who stood beside him holding his hand. He answered slowly. "I am angry," he said, "but I am also tired. And I don't want my daughter to remember today only as the day her father was put in handcuffs. I want her to remember that people stood up. I want her to know that when something wrong happened, the truth did not stay quiet. A reporter asked, "What do you want now, Mr. Reed?" Marcus looked back at his store. Through the window, he could see the photo of Denise behind the counter. "I want my daughter to grow up in a city where she doesn't have to prove she belongs in a place her family built." For a moment, nobody asked another question. The quote spread even faster than the video. That night, after the crowd finally thinned and the last customer left, Marcus locked the door and turned the sign to closed. The store was quiet again, but not peaceful. Too much had happened inside those walls. Lila was asleep in the office chair, curled under her blanket, one hand still clutching the sleeve of Marcus's jacket. Marcus sat at the counter and looked at the marks on his wrists. He thought about Denise. He wondered what she would have said. She would have been furious first. Then she would have made tea for everyone. Then she would have looked him straight in the eye and said, "Don't you dare let them make you smaller." A knock came at the door. Marcus looked up and saw a courier standing outside holding a large envelope. Confused, he unlocked the door just enough to take it. The envelope had no return address, only his name printed across the front. Inside was a purchase offer from the same development company that had been pressuring him for months. The number was bigger than any offer before it, big enough to pay off debts, buy a house, fund Lila's college, and leave him with money to breathe for the first time in years. Marcus read the final line twice. The offer was valid only if he agreed to vacate the property within 30 days. He sat alone beneath the buzzing lights, holding the paper in both hands. That morning, they had tried to remove him with handcuffs. Now they were trying to remove him with a check. Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after Lila had gone to bed, the developer's offer spread open beneath the yellow light. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. Every few minutes, he looked toward Lila's bedroom door, then back at the number on the paper. It was the kind of money that made a tired man imagine a different life. A life where bills did not sit unopened on the counter. A life where he did not have to choose between fixing the store freezer and buying new school clothes. A life where Lila could have a backyard, a college fund, maybe even the kind of childhood Marcus always wished he could give her. For a moment, he let himself imagine saying yes. He imagined closing Reed's Corner Market, packing Denise's photograph in a box, taking the height marks off the office doorway, and walking away from the cracked floor tiles, the old register, the faded sign, and every shelf he had stocked before sunrise. He imagined moving somewhere quieter, somewhere nobody knew his name, somewhere he would not have to stand in front of cameras and explain why he belonged. The thought brought relief, and that relief made him feel guilty. Then he heard Lila's voice from the hallway. "Daddy." Marcus quickly folded the papers, but she had already seen them. She stood there in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep, holding the stuffed rabbit Denise had given her when she was 3. "Why are you awake?" he asked gently. "I heard you sighing." Marcus gave a tired smile. "I didn't know sighing could wake people up. Yours can." She walked to the table and climbed into the chair across from him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Lila pointed at the envelope. "Is that about the store?" Marcus leaned back. He wanted to protect her from another hard conversation, but the day had already taken too much innocence from her for him to pretend children only understood simple things. "Yes," he said. "Some people want to buy it. Because they like it." Marcus looked down. "Because they want it gone." Lila's fingers tightened around her stuffed rabbit. "Are we going to leave?" The question hung in the room, small and heavy. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. Lila looked hurt, but not surprised. She turned her eyes toward the window. "Mommy's picture is there." "I know." "And Grandpa Raymond's picture." "I know." "And my drawings." Marcus nodded. "I know, baby." She looked back at him. "If we leave, where will all that go?" Marcus did not answer right away, because that was the question he had been afraid to ask himself. Where does a family's history go when the building that held it becomes another glass tower? Where do the memories go when the people who made them are told the land is worth more without them on it? Where does belonging go when someone can put a price on your disappearance. The next morning, Marcus opened the store at the same time as always. His wrists were still sore. His heart was still unsettled. But when he turned the key and lifted the door, the bell rang with the same tired sound it had made for years. Only this time, he stopped in the doorway and listened to it. He thought about Raymond opening the place for the first time. He thought about Denise laughing behind the counter. He thought about Lila as a toddler, asleep in a cardboard box lined with a blanket, while he unloaded groceries. He thought about all the people who had walked through that door not just to buy something, but to be seen. By 9 o'clock, neighbors had already gathered outside again. Someone had brought coffee. Someone else had brought folding chairs. The signs from the day before were still taped to the window, but now there were more. Protect legacy businesses. We stand with Marcus. Our block, our story. The crowd was smaller than the day before, but stronger in a way. Yesterday had been shock. Today was decision. Mayor Carter arrived without cameras at first. She stepped inside and found Marcus standing behind the counter, holding the developer's offer. "You don't have to decide today," she said. Marcus looked at the paper. "That's what I told myself all night. And then my daughter asked me where her mother's picture would go." The mayor's expression softened. Marcus folded the offer and slipped it back into the envelope. "I thought the hardest part of yesterday was being put in handcuffs. But maybe the hardest part is realizing that was only one way of telling me to leave." Mayor Carter nodded slowly. Sometimes pressure comes with a badge. Sometimes it comes with a check. Marcus looked through the window at the people outside. "I'm not against change. I'm not against new people moving in. But change that only works if everyone who was already here disappears isn't progress. It's erasure." A few hours later, Marcus stepped outside. Lila stood beside him, holding his hand. Mayor Carter stood nearby, but she did not speak first. This moment belonged to Marcus. The crowd quieted when they saw the envelope in his hand. Marcus looked at the faces in front of him. Some he had known for decades. Some he had met only yesterday. But all of them were watching like the future of more than one store depended on what he would say. "Yesterday," Marcus began, "I was handcuffed in my own store. Not because I broke in. Not because I stole anything. Not because I harmed anyone. But because someone looked at me and decided I did not belong in a place my family built." The crowd was silent. "Last night, I received an offer to sell this building. It was a lot of money. More money than I have ever seen written on a piece of paper. Enough money to make a man with bills and a child and tired bones think very carefully." He looked down at Lila, then back up. "And I did think carefully. I thought about my daughter's future. I thought about peace. I thought about walking away. But I also thought about my wife, Denise. I thought about Raymond Ellis, who opened the store when banks barely wanted to look him in the eye. I thought about every neighbor who came in here short on cash and left with food anyway. I thought about every child who waited here safely after school. I thought about all the people who were told, in one way or another, that they did not belong." His voice grew firmer. "This store was never just mine. It belongs to every person who walked through that door and felt respected. It belongs to the people who built this neighborhood before anyone called it valuable. And I will not let my daughter learn that the right response to being pushed is to disappear." Marcus lifted the envelope. "So my answer is no." Then he tore the offer in half. For one breath, the whole block froze. Then the crowd erupted. People clapped, shouted, cried, and embraced each other. Lila wrapped both arms around Marcus's waist, and he placed one hand on the back of her head, holding her close as the torn paper fluttered near his shoes. Mayor Carter kept her promise. In the weeks that followed, the city launched a review of false complaints being used against small businesses. The officers faced disciplinary proceedings. Claire Whitman issued a public apology, though Marcus did not rush to forgive what had not yet been repaired. When she came into the store one afternoon, eyes lowered, and said she was sorry, Marcus listened quietly. Then he said, "An apology is a start. Change behavior is proof." Months passed. Reed's Corner Market did not disappear. It changed, but in the way living things change when they are cared for. The old sign was repainted but not replaced. The freezer was repaired. The city helped fund improvements for legacy businesses, and Marcus used part of the support to build the small deli counter Denise had always wanted. On the side wall of the store, Lila and children from the neighborhood painted a mural. It showed Raymond holding the first set of keys, Denise smiling behind the counter, Marcus standing with Lila, and the community gathered around them. At the bottom, in bright blue letters, were 4 words: "We belong here." One morning, Marcus opened the store just before sunrise. Lila, now a little taller, helped arrange apples near the front. A customer passing through the neighborhood stepped inside and looked around. "Are you the owner?" the man asked. Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but Lila beat him to it. "Yes," she said proudly. "He is. This is my dad's store." Marcus smiled. This time, nobody questioned it. Sometimes injustice walks through the front door, wearing authority. Sometimes it speaks through a phone call, hides behind polite words, or arrives inside an envelope with a price attached. But truth has a way of finding witnesses. And when a community refuses to stay silent, even the moment meant to humiliate someone can become the moment that reveals their strength. Marcus Reed was arrested in his own store. But by the end, the whole city knew exactly who he was. Not a suspect, not a stranger, not someone who needed permission to belong. He was a father, a business owner, a neighbor, and a man who refused to disappear. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment your city below so we can see where you're watching from.